Marcus Brennan heard his daughter scream before he saw her. That sound, raw terror from a 6-year-old throat, stopped his heart cold. He ran. Classroom door slightly open. His little girl Lily, pressed against the wall, a woman's hand wrapped around her tiny neck. "Say it," the teacher commanded. "Say I am worthless." Lily's trembling voice obeyed. But then Marcus saw something worse. Bruises. Old ones. Yellow and purple beneath her sleeves. This wasn't the first time. One phone call later, 200 iron wolves were riding toward Pinewood Elementary, and what they would uncover would destroy an entire school district. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and follow this story to the end. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Marcus Brennan wasn't supposed to be at the school that Thursday afternoon. His shift at the construction site ended early when the concrete delivery got delayed. Most days, Lily rode the bus home. Most days, Marcus waited on the porch with a glass of lemonade and watched his daughter walk up the driveway with her backpack bouncing against her small frame. But something had been wrong for weeks now. Something he couldn't name, but felt in his bones, the way a man feels a storm coming before the clouds roll in. Lily had stopped talking at dinner. She'd stopped drawing those pictures she used to make him, the ones with stick figures holding hands always labeled Daddy and Lily in crooked crayon letters. She'd stopped asking for bedtime stories. She'd stopped being Lily. So when his shift ended 3 hours early, Marcus didn't go home. He drove straight to Pinewood Elementary. The parking lot was nearly empty. School didn't let out for another 45 minutes. Marcus walked through the front doors without signing in at the office, without checking with the secretary, without following any of the protocols that parents were supposed to follow. He just walked. Down the main hallway, past the cafeteria, toward the second-grade classrooms where his daughter spent 7 hours every day. That's when he heard the scream. It cut through the empty corridor like a knife through flesh. High-pitched, terrified, and unmistakably his daughter's voice. Marcus ran. His work boots pounded against the linoleum floor. His heart slammed against his ribs. Every instinct he'd spent 3 years burying, every reflex from his years riding with the iron wolves, exploded back to life in a single second. Classroom 7. The door stood slightly ajar. He pushed it open, and the world stopped. Lily, his baby girl, his entire reason for breathing, stood pressed against the wall near the windows. Her small hands were raised in front of her face. Her body trembled so hard he could see it from 20 feet away. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she wasn't making a sound anymore. She'd learned not to. Standing over her was a woman Marcus recognized from parent-teacher conferences, Mrs. Victoria Harmon, 53 years old, 22 years at this school, gray hair pulled back tight, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, and her hand was wrapped around Lily's throat. "Say it again," Victoria commanded. Her voice was ice. No emotion, no humanity, just cold, calculated control. "Say it louder this time so I can hear you properly." Lily's voice came out broken, barely a whisper. I am worthless. I am stupid. Nobody wants me." That's right. Victoria's grip tightened slightly. "And what happens to worthless little girls who lie to their teachers? They get punished." "Good. You're learning. Now, get your hands off my daughter." Marcus's voice filled the room like thunder. Low, controlled, deadly. Victoria Harmon turned. For one fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. Fear, possibly. But it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by something that made Marcus's blood run cold. Annoyance. She was annoyed at being interrupted. Victoria released Lily's throat and straightened her cardigan as casually as if she'd been caught watering plants instead of choking a child. "Mr. Brennan," her voice carried the same dismissive tone she probably used with the janitors. "You're not supposed to be here. Parents must check in at the front office before—" "I said get away from her." Marcus crossed the room in 4 strides. He dropped to his knees in front of Lily, and what he saw up close nearly broke him. Her neck bore red marks, fresh ones from today. But that wasn't the worst of it. Her sleeves had ridden up during the struggle, and beneath the fabric, Marcus saw bruises. Old bruises, yellow ones fading to green, purple ones still dark and angry. Marks that formed distinct patterns. Fingerprints. An adult's fingerprints wrapped around a 6-year-old's arms. "Lily," his voice cracked. "Baby, look at me. Look at Daddy." But Lily wouldn't meet his eyes. She stared at the floor, still shaking, still silent, still trapped in whatever hell this woman had created inside her mind. "How long?" Marcus stood slowly, turning to face Victoria. "How long have you been doing this to her?" Victoria. Harmon actually laughed. It was a small sound, barely more than a breath, but it contained decades of confidence. Decades of knowing she was untouchable. "Mr. Brennan, I understand you're upset. Single fathers often struggle with discipline, and children from broken homes tend to act out. Your daughter has been lying, disrupting class, and refusing to complete her work. I've simply been providing the structure she clearly lacks at home." Structure. Marcus repeated the word like it was poison. "You call choking a 6-year-old structure? I was correcting her posture. She slouches terribly. If you'd attended more parent-teacher conferences instead of working all the time, you'd know that Lily has significant behavioral problems that require firm handling." Marcus looked at his daughter again, at the fear carved into every line of her small face, at the way she flinched when Victoria's voice rose even slightly. This wasn't discipline. This was torture. "Lily." He knelt again, gentler this time. "I need you to tell me the truth. Okay? Whatever you say. Daddy's not going to be mad. Has Mrs. Harmon hurt you before?" Silence. "Baby, please. You can tell me." Lily's lips moved, but no sound came out. She glanced at Victoria, then back at the floor. "She's not going to tell you anything," Victoria said, straightening papers on her desk. "Children learn quickly who has authority in a classroom. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have lesson plans to prepare. You can take Lily home early today. Consider it a gift." Something snapped inside Marcus Brennan. Not the kind of snapping that leads to violence, though every muscle in his body screamed for it. No, this was different. This was the cold, calculating clarity he'd learned during his years with the Iron Wolves. The ability to see a situation clearly and know exactly what needed to happen next. He wouldn't touch Victoria Harmon. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction of playing victim. He wouldn't spend the next 5 years in prison while his daughter grew up alone. Instead, he would destroy her. Legally. Completely. Utterly. "Come on, baby." He lifted Lily into his arms, feeling her small body curl against his chest. "We're going home." "Mr. Brennan." Victoria's voice followed him toward the door. "I hope you're not planning to make a scene about this. The administration is very supportive of my teaching methods. Principal Webb and I have worked together for 15 years. Any complaint you make will simply be filed away with all the others." Marcus stopped at the door. He didn't turn around. "All the others... parents complain." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "They always do. It never amounts to anything. Children exaggerate. Parents overreact. And teachers with my seniority are protected, so please save yourself the embarrassment." Marcus walked out without another word. But Victoria Harmon had just made a fatal mistake. She'd told him there were other complaints, other parents, other children. Lily wasn't the only one. The parking lot was empty except for Marcus's pickup truck and 3 other vehicles. He carried Lily to the truck, opened the passenger door, and set her gently in the seat. His hands were shaking as he buckled her seatbelt. His whole body vibrated with rage he couldn't release. "Daddy." Lily's voice was so small he almost missed it. "Yeah, baby, I'm here." "Am I in trouble?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. His daughter, the victim, was asking if she was in trouble. "No." He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Lily, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you understand?" But Mrs. Harmon said, Mrs. Harmon is a liar. She's a bad person who hurts children, and she's never going to hurt you again. I promise. Daddy promises." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. "She said you'd give me away. She said if I told anyone you'd send me to a foster home because I was too much trouble. She said bad girls don't get to have daddies." Marcus felt his heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. "Oh baby, no, 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 no." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "I will never give you away. Never. You're my whole world, Lily. There's nothing you could ever do that would make me stop loving you. Nothing." Lily sobbed against his shoulder. Great heaving sobs that seemed too big for her tiny body. All the fear and pain and confusion she'd been holding inside for months came pouring out in that parking lot, and all Marcus could do was hold her. When her crying finally slowed, Marcus pulled back and looked into her eyes. "I need to ask you something important, okay? And I need you to tell me the truth, even if it's scary." Lily nodded. "How long has Mrs. Harmon been hurting you?" Lily's lower lip trembled. Since Halloween. 4 months. His daughter had been suffering for 4 months. "Why didn't you tell me?" "She said you'd be mad. She said I was making you tired. She said you'd be happier if I wasn't around anymore." Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "She said Mommy left because of me, because I was bad." The world went red. Elena, his wife, Lily's mother, dead 3 years from a drunk driver, and this monster had told a 6-year-old that her mother's death was her fault. Marcus's hands balled into fists so tight his knuckles cracked. Every instinct told him to march back into that school and make Victoria Harmon pay, to show her what happened to people who hurt children, to unleash 3 years of buried rage on someone who truly deserved it. But Lily's small hand touched his arm. "Daddy, are you okay?" He looked at his daughter, at her red eyes and tear-stained cheeks, at the bruises he could now see clearly on her arms and neck, at the fear still lurking behind her gaze. She needed him, not in prison, not in a rage. She needed her father. Marcus took a deep breath and made a choice. "I'm okay, baby. Let's get you home." He walked around to the driver's side and climbed in, started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot. Then he took out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 3 years. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Hello." "Gunner, it's Hawk." Silence on the other end. Then a long exhale. "Brother, been a while." "Yeah, it has." Marcus looked at Lily in the rearview mirror. She'd fallen asleep, exhausted from crying. "I need help." "What kind of help?" "Someone hurt Lily, a teacher. She's been abusing her for months. There's bruises, Gunner, bruises everywhere. And she told my daughter that her mom died because of her." Another silence. When Gunner spoke again, his voice had changed, colder, harder. The voice of a man who had led the Iron Wolves for 20 years. "Where are you?" "Heading home." "But the school Pinewood Elementary, they're covering it up. The teacher told me there have been other complaints. Other kids. They're protecting her." "Give me an hour. I'll make some calls." "Gunner, I don't want violence. I can't go to prison. Lily needs me." "Brother, you called the Iron Wolves. That means you're family again. And nobody hurts family. Nobody." Gunner's voice softened slightly. "We'll do this right. Legal. By the book. But we'll do it together. You're not alone anymore, Hawk. You never were." The line went dead. Marcus drove home with his sleeping daughter beside him and his phone already buzzing with incoming messages. Brothers reaching out. Brothers he'd walked away from 3 years ago. Brothers who were now dropping everything to help him. Because that's what the Iron Wolves did. That's who they were. Not outlaws, not criminals, not the monsters the media painted them as. They were men who protected the vulnerable. Men who stood up when the system failed. Men who showed up. And in 1 hour, they would show up in force. Elena Brennan had been dead for 3 years, 2 months and 14 days. Marcus knew the exact count because he'd marked every single one of them on the calendar in his kitchen, a small X in red ink that reminded him of everything he'd lost. She'd been driving home from her sister's house, 10 miles from their front door. A drunk driver ran a red light at 70 miles per hour and hit her car broadside. She died before the ambulance arrived. The driver fled the scene. Police found him 2 days later passed out in a motel room with empty bottles scattered around his bed. He got 8 years. He'd be eligible for parole in 4. Marcus got a funeral and a 3-year-old daughter who didn't understand why mommy wasn't coming home. The night they buried Elena, Marcus made a decision. He sold his Harley, the custom build he'd spent 5 years perfecting. He sold his leather vest with the Iron Wolves patches. He sold everything that connected him to the life he'd lived before, and he became a father. Full-time. No distractions. No brotherhood. No road. Just him and Lily against the world. The Iron Wolves understood. Gunnar Morrison, the club president, had stood beside Marcus at Elena's grave and told him to do whatever he needed to do. Family first, brother. Always. That's the code. If your daughter needs you to walk away, you walk away. We'll be here if you ever need us. Marcus had walked away. He'd found work at a construction company. He'd learned to braid hair and pack lunches and help with homework. He'd become the kind of father his own dad had never been: present, patient, devoted. And for 3 years, he'd thought he was doing everything right. Now he knew he'd missed something terrible. Something that had been happening right under his nose for 4 months while he worked overtime to pay the bills and keep food on the table. Guilt crashed over him like a wave. How had he not seen it? The signs were there. Lily's silence, her withdrawal, the way she'd started flinching at loud noises, the nightmares that had her screaming in the middle of the night. He'd thought she was still grieving Elena. He'd thought she was going through a phase. He'd thought time would help. He'd been wrong. Marcus carried Lily into the house and laid her on the couch, covering her with a blanket. She didn't wake. Whatever had happened at school had drained every ounce of energy from her small body. He stood there watching her sleep, this tiny person who depended on him for everything, and made a silent promise. Victoria Harmon would pay for what she'd done. The school would pay for covering it up. Every single person who had hurt his daughter or allowed her to be hurt would face consequences. But he would do it the right way, the legal way, the way that would keep him out of prison and by Lily's side where she needed him. His phone buzzed. A text from Gunnar. Riders assembling, 1 hour out. Don't do anything until we get there. Show. Marcus typed back. Understood. Then another text. How many kids do you think she hurt? Marcus thought about what Victoria had said. Other complaints. Plural. Filed away. Ignored. I don't know, he typed. But we're going to find out. 50 minutes later, Marcus heard them coming. The rumble started low like distant thunder. Then it grew. Louder. Closer. The unmistakable sound of motorcycle engines, dozens of them rolling down his quiet suburban street. He stepped onto his porch and watched them arrive. First came Gunnar Morrison on his black Road King. Behind him, in perfect formation, rode the Iron Wolves. 20 bikes. 30. 40. They kept coming, filling the street from end to end. Neighbors emerged from their houses, drawn by the noise. Marcus saw curtains twitch, doors crack open. The quiet suburb had never seen anything like this. Gunnar killed his engine and swung off his bike. He was 62 years old with a gray beard down to his chest and arms covered in faded tattoos. But his eyes were sharp, and when he walked, he moved like a man half his age. Brother, he pulled Marcus into a tight embrace. Tell me everything. Marcus told him. About arriving early, about the scream, about finding Victoria with her hand around Lily's throat, about the bruises old and new, about the threats, about Elena. By the time he finished, a crowd had gathered. 47 Iron Wolves stood in his front yard, their faces carved from stone. She told a child her dead mother was her fault. Gunnar's voice was quiet. Dangerous. She said that to your little girl. Yes. And the school's covering for her. That's what she said. 15 years of complaints, all ignored. Gunnar turned to face his brothers. These weren't young men looking for trouble. They were veterans, business owners, fathers, and grandfathers. Men who had buried friends and raised families and understood what it meant to protect the innocent. Brothers, Gunnar called out. You heard what happened. A teacher at Pinewood Elementary has been abusing children. Multiple children from the sound of it. The school's been covering it up. And today she put her hands on Hawk's daughter. A low growl rippled through the crowd. Now I know what some of you are thinking, but we're not doing this that way. We're going to do this right, legal, public. We're going to expose every single person who knew about this abuse and did nothing. We're going to make sure that teacher never touches another child again. And we're going to show this community what the Iron Wolves really stand for. He turned back to Marcus. First thing tomorrow morning we go to that school, not to threaten, not to intimidate, just to be present, to let them know that this family has people who will stand up for them. Then we start talking to other parents, finding other victims, building a case that no lawyer can ignore. And if they try to silence us, Marcus asked. Gunnar smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Brother, there's 200 Iron Wolves in Montana. Every one of them is on their way. By tomorrow afternoon, that school won't be able to pretend this isn't happening. The whole world is going to know what Victoria Harmon did to those children. He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Your daughter's going to get justice. I promise you that. And anyone who tries to stop us is going to learn what happens when you pick a fight with family. Marcus looked at the men gathered in his yard. Brothers he'd walked away from. Brothers who had come running the moment he called. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something he'd forgotten existed. Hope. Lily woke up screaming at 2 a.m. Marcus was at her bedside before the echo faded. He gathered her into his arms, feeling her tiny body shake with sobs. It's okay, baby. Daddy's here. You're safe. She was hurting me again, Lily gasped between sobs. In my dream, she was hurting me and nobody came. That's never going to happen again. Never. I promise. How do you know? Marcus thought about the 47 motorcycles parked outside his house, about the phone calls Gunnar had made, about the 200 riders who were at this very moment making their way across Montana. Because you've got a lot of people who love you, Lily, more than you know, and we're all going to make sure you're safe. Lily sniffled. Like who? Like your Uncle Gunnar. Remember him? He came to visit when you were little, right after Mommy went to heaven. The man with the big beard. That's him. He's here now. And he brought his friends. They're all going to help us. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then in a small voice, Are they bikers like you used to be? Marcus smiled sadly. Yeah, baby. Like I used to be. Mrs. Harmon said bikers are bad people. She said they hurt kids like me. Something cold settled in Marcus's chest. What else did Mrs. Harmon say? Lily's grip tightened on his arm. She said if I ever told anyone what she did, the bikers would come and take me away. She said they'd sell me to bad people. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She said that's what happened to the last little girl who told. Marcus felt sick. This woman hadn't just abused his daughter physically. She'd created an entire mythology of terror. She'd used Marcus's past, his brotherhood, as a weapon against his own child. Lily, listen to me very carefully. He tilted her chin up so she could see his eyes. Mrs. Harmon lied. About everything. Bikers aren't bad people. The Iron Wolves are my family. They would never hurt you. They came here to protect you. Really? Really? Tomorrow I'm going to introduce you to some of them. You'll see. They're just regular people who ride motorcycles. Some of them have daughters just like you. Lily considered this. Do they like ice cream? Despite everything, Marcus laughed. Yeah, baby, they like ice cream. Okay. Lily nestled against his chest. Maybe they're not so scary then. Marcus held her until she fell back asleep. Then he sat in the darkness listening to her breathe and let the rage wash over him again. Victoria Harmon had tried to destroy his daughter, not just with bruises and threats, but with psychological torture designed to isolate a 6-year-old from everyone who could help her. She'd turned Marcus's own identity into a weapon. She'd told a child that her father's people were monsters who would hurt her, and she'd done it while collecting a salary from the state, while being protected by administrators who valued reputation over children. Tomorrow, that protection would end. Tomorrow the Iron Wolves would show Victoria Harmon and everyone who enabled her what real monsters looked like, and they would do it without laying a single finger on anyone. Because the most devastating justice isn't delivered with fists. It's delivered with truth. Daeso. Dawn came gray and cold over Montana. Marcus made breakfast for Lily, pancakes shaped like hearts, her favorite. She ate more than she had in weeks, glancing out the window at the motorcycles that still lined the street. Daddy, why are they still here? They're waiting for us. Marcus set down his coffee. Today we're going to the school. We're going to talk to the principal and tell him what Mrs. Harmon did. Lily's fork froze halfway to her mouth. No, baby. No, she'll hurt me again. She said if I ever told, she'd make it worse. She said she'd make sure nobody believed me. Marcus knelt beside her chair. Remember what I told you last night about how the bikers are here to protect you? Lily nodded slowly. Well, when we go to that school today, they're coming with us. All of them. And I promise you Mrs. Harmon will never get close enough to hurt you again. But I need you to be brave. Okay? Can you do that for me? Lily looked out the window again, at the row of motorcycles, at the men in leather who were drinking coffee and talking quietly in the morning light. Will Uncle Gunnar be there? He'll be right next to you the whole time. Lily took a deep breath. For a moment she looked exactly like her mother, that same determined set to her jaw, that same fire in her eyes. Okay, I'll be brave. Marcus kissed her forehead. That's my girl. An hour later they pulled into the parking lot of Pinewood Elementary. Behind them in a column that stretched for 2 blocks came the Iron Wolves. The rumble of their engines shook windows and drew every eye in the neighborhood. Teachers stopped mid-step on their way into the building. Parents froze with their children's hands still clasped in theirs. Even the crossing guard abandoned his post to stare. 200 motorcycles filled the parking lot and spilled onto the surrounding streets. 200 men and women in leather dismounted and stood in silent formation. Marcus carried Lily toward the front entrance. Gunnar walked on his right. A woman named Rachel Iron Wolf, road captain and mother of 3, walked on his left. Principal Douglas Webb burst through the front doors before they reached them. He was a thin man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a comb-over that fooled nobody. His face had gone the color of old milk. What is this? He demanded. You can't, this is school property. I'm calling the police. Call them. Gunnar's voice was calm. We'll wait. We have some things to discuss with law enforcement anyway. Things about one of your teachers. Things about the complaints you've been ignoring for 15 years. Webb's face went from pale to green. I don't know what you're talking about. Victoria Harmon, Marcus said. 4th grade. She's been physically and psychologically abusing my daughter for 4 months. Yesterday I walked in on her choking Lily and forcing her to call herself worthless. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Brennan. One that I'm sure can be explained if we just explain these. Marcus pulled up Lily's sleeve, revealing the bruises that marked her small arm. The fingerprints. The evidence of months of abuse. Webb stared. His mouth opened and closed several times. Those could be from anything. Children play rough. They fall. They're handprints, Rachel interrupted. Adult handprints. I'm a registered nurse, Principal Webb. I've documented child abuse injuries for 15 years. Those marks were made by an adult gripping a child's arm hard enough to leave bruises, repeatedly, over an extended period. I want to see the complaints, Marcus said. Every complaint ever filed against Victoria Harmon. I want to know how many children she's hurt. I want to know why you protected her. I can't release confidential. You can release them to the police. Gunnar stepped forward. Or to the FBI if this goes federal. Which it will, by the way, if we find evidence of a systematic cover-up. Child abuse is a civil rights violation when it happens in public schools. That makes it federal jurisdiction. Webb's hands were shaking now. Let's go inside and discuss this privately. There's no need for all these people. These people are staying right here, Marcus said. And this discussion isn't private. It's very public. Every parent who drops their kid off today is going to see us. They're going to ask questions. And when they do, we're going to tell them exactly what Victoria Harmon has been doing behind closed doors. And then, Gunnar added, we're going to ask them if their children have ever come home with unexplained bruises, if their kids have ever suddenly become afraid of school, if they've ever filed complaints that were ignored. He leaned closer to Webb. How many are we going to find, Principal? How many children has your school failed? Webb's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked like a man watching his entire world collapse. You don't understand, he whispered. She's Victoria, her brother is Richard Harmon, Rachel said, chairman of the school board. Yes, we know. We've done our research. Webb went absolutely still. That's why you've been covering for her, Marcus realized. Not because you believe she's innocent, because her brother controls your career. He controls everything, Webb said, his voice hollow. The school board, the superintendent, half the city council. You have no idea what you're dealing with. If you go after Victoria, Richard will destroy you. He'll destroy all of you. Gunnar smiled that cold smile again. He's welcome to try, but we faced a lot worse than politicians, Principal Webb. We faced men who would actually hurt us. Richard Harmon is just a bully with a title, and we've been dealing with bullies our whole lives. He turned to the assembled Iron Wolves. Brothers and sisters, we've got work to do. Spread out, talk to parents, find other victims, document everything. By the end of today, I want enough evidence to put Victoria Harmon behind bars for the rest of her miserable life. The Brotherhood moved like a well-oiled machine. Groups of 3 or 4 headed toward different areas of the parking lot, approaching parents as they arrived, explaining quietly what had happened, asking careful questions. Marcus watched Webb's face cycle through emotions, fear, anger, desperation before settling on something like defeat. You've destroyed this school, Webb whispered. Everything I've built, everything I've worked for. No, Marcus replied. Victoria Harmon destroyed this school. You just helped her hide the bodies. He looked down at Lily, who had been watching the whole exchange with wide eyes. Come on, baby, let's go home. These nice people are going to handle things from here. But as he turned to leave, a woman's voice cut through the morning air. Mr. Brennan? Marcus stopped, turned. Victoria Harmon stood in the doorway of the school, her arms crossed over her chest, her face arranged in an expression of absolute contempt. I told you this would go nowhere, she said. You can bring your little gang here all you want. It won't change anything. By this time tomorrow, you'll be arrested for harassment, your daughter will be in foster care, and this whole circus will be forgotten. She smiled. A cold, satisfied smile. You should have listened to me when you had the chance. Marcus felt Lily press closer against his chest, felt her small body trembling. But he also felt something else, felt her straighten slightly, felt her take a breath. You're a liar. Lily's voice was small but clear. Every head in the parking lot turned toward her. What did you say? Victoria's smile faltered. You're a liar, Lily repeated louder this time. You told me Daddy would give me away. You told me the bikers would hurt me. You told me Mommy left because of me. Her voice cracked but didn't break. But Daddy's here. The bikers came to help me, and Mommy didn't leave. She went to heaven. She loved me. Tears streamed down Lily's face, but she kept talking. You're a bad person, Mrs. Harmon. You hurt me. You hurt lots of kids. And you're not going to hurt anyone ever again because my daddy's going to stop you. She buried her face against Marcus's shoulder. The parking lot was utterly silent. Then one by one the Iron Wolves began to clap, a slow building applause that grew until it thundered across the morning air. Victoria Harmon's face had gone white as chalk. For the first time since Marcus had known her, she looked afraid. This isn't over, she hissed. Richard will what? A new voice joined the conversation. Marcus turned to see a woman in her 30s approaching, holding a little boy's hand. Richard Harmon. Is that who's been protecting you all these years? Behind her, more parents were gathering. 10, 20. Their faces were hard, angry. Because if that's true, the woman continued, then I think the FBI is going to be very interested in how the school board chairman covered up child abuse by his own sister for 15 years. She knelt beside her son. Show them, Tommy. Show them what she did. The boy, maybe 7 years old, pulled up his shirt sleeve. There, fading to yellow, were bruises identical to Lily's. The same shape, the same pattern, the same adult fingerprints. "This was last month," the mother said. "We filed a complaint. Webb told us Tommy fell on the playground. He made us sign a form saying we wouldn't pursue legal action in exchange for Tommy being transferred to a different class." More parents stepped forward, more children with sleeves rolled up, more evidence, the bruises, the tears, the stories. Victoria Harmon had hurt dozens of children over 15 years, and today, finally, they were all going to speak. The first domino had fallen, but the weight of what was coming, the investigation, the revelations, the war that Richard Harmon was about to wage would test Marcus and his brotherhood in ways none of them could imagine. Victoria Harmon thought her brother would protect her. She thought power and money and connections would save her. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. Within 2 hours, the parking lot of Pinewood Elementary had transformed into something no one in Copper Ridge had ever witnessed. 17 parents stood in clusters, their children beside them, their faces carved from equal parts rage and relief. 17 families who had spent months, some of them years, believing they were alone. They weren't alone anymore. Marcus watched from the edge of the crowd as Gunnar spoke with a father named David Chen. David's daughter, a shy 9-year-old named May, had been in Victoria Harmon's class 2 years ago. The bruises had healed long ago, but the fear in May's eyes when she saw her former teacher standing in the school doorway told Marcus everything he needed to know. "She made May stand in the corner for 3 hours once," David was saying, his voice tight with barely contained fury. 3 hours, because she pronounced a word wrong during reading time. When I complained, Webb said May was being dramatic. He said Victoria was one of the best teachers in the district. "Did you document it?" Gunnar asked. "Photos, medical records." "I tried. But by the time I got May to a doctor, the bruises were fading. The doctor said he couldn't determine what caused them. And then Richard Harmon called me personally." David's jaw tightened. "He told me that if I pursued this, he would make sure May was flagged as a problem student. Said it would follow her through her entire academic career. Said no good school would touch her. He threatened your daughter's future to protect his sister." "He didn't just threaten it, he destroyed it." David's eyes glistened. "I pulled May out of public school after that. We've been homeschooling her for 2 years. She still has nightmares. Still wakes up screaming that Mrs. Harmon is coming to get her." Marcus felt Lily stir in his arms. She'd fallen asleep against his shoulder, exhausted by the morning's events. He held her tighter, feeling the fragile weight of her trust. This could have been their story. If he'd listened to Victoria's threats. If he'd walked away and stayed silent. Lily could have spent years believing she was worthless. Believing her mother's death was her fault. Believing her father would abandon her. Instead, she'd stood up. 6 years old, terrified, traumatized, and she'd looked her abuser in the eye and called her a liar. Marcus had never been more proud of anything in his entire life. "We're building a case," Gunnar told David. "Federal level. Child abuse in public schools is a civil rights violation. If we can prove the district systematically covered up Victoria's behavior, we're looking at criminal charges for everyone involved. Webb, the superintendent, Richard Harmon himself." "You really think you can take down Richard Harmon?" David's voice held equal parts hope and skepticism. "The man owns half this town. He's got judges in his pocket, police chiefs, city council members." "He doesn't own the FBI," Gunnar replied, "and he doesn't own us." A commotion near the school entrance drew Marcus's attention. He turned to see Victoria Harmon being escorted inside by Principal Webb, her face a mask of controlled rage. But just before she disappeared through the doors, she looked directly at Marcus. The hatred in her eyes was pure and undiluted. This woman didn't see herself as a monster. She saw herself as a victim persecuted by ungrateful parents who didn't understand the importance of discipline, targeted by a motorcycle gang too ignorant to recognize good teaching. She believed she would win. She believed her brother would sweep all of this away like he'd swept away everything else. Marcus held her gaze until the doors closed behind her. "You picked the wrong family," he thought. "You picked the wrong father. and you're about to learn exactly what that means." Rachel approached him, her phone pressed to her ear. "We've got a problem," she said, quietly pulling him aside. "I just got off the phone with a contact at the county sheriff's office. Richard Harmon called them 20 minutes ago. He's demanding they arrest the Iron Wolves for trespassing and intimidation. We're on public property. The parking lot is public during school hours. Doesn't matter. Harmon's got pull with the sheriff. They're sending deputies now. ETA 15 minutes. Marcus felt his stomach clench. "If they arrest us?" "They won't arrest everyone, just the leadership. Gunnar, me, probably you." Rachel's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders. "They'll hold us for 48 hours, maybe longer. By then, the media will have moved on. The parents will have been intimidated into silence, and Victoria Harmon will be back in her classroom like nothing happened." "So what do we do?" Rachel smiled grimly. "We make sure the media doesn't move on. We make sure the story is too big to bury." She pulled out her phone and started typing. "I've got contacts at 3 different news stations, CNN, Fox, and the local affiliate. If we can get cameras here before the deputies arrive, Richard Harmon's little arrest stunt becomes the story of how a corrupt school board chairman tried to silence parents who exposed his sister's abuse. Will they come? For a story about child abuse cover-ups and a motorcycle club taking on the establishment?" Rachel's smile widened. "They're already on their way." The next 15 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. He watched the road, waiting for the flash of red and blue lights that would signal the beginning of Richard Harmon's counterattack. He watched the parents gathered in the parking lot, their initial courage starting to waver as word spread about the incoming deputies. He watched Lily sleeping in his truck, innocent and vulnerable, unaware of the war being waged on her behalf. Gunnar appeared at his side. "You should take her home. If things get ugly, I'm not leaving." Marcus's voice left no room for argument. "This started because of what happened to my daughter. I'm seeing it through." "Brother, I respect that. But if you get arrested, who takes care of Lily?" "Elena's sister. She lives in Billings. She'll come if I call." Marcus turned to face Gunnar fully. "But I'm not calling, because we're not getting arrested. We're going to stand our ground, tell the truth, and let the whole world see what Richard Harmon really is." Gunnar studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You've changed, Hawk. 3 years ago, you would have been the first one throwing punches. Now look at you. Strategic. Patient." He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Elena would be proud." The mention of his wife's name hit Marcus like a physical blow. He blinked against the sudden sting in his eyes. "She'd be furious," he said quietly. "Furious that this happened to Lily. Furious that I didn't see it sooner. You saw it when it mattered. That's what counts." A shout went up from the edge of the parking lot. Marcus turned to see a news van pulling in satellite dish already extending from its roof. Behind it came another, then a third. Rachel had delivered. The reporters emerged with cameras rolling microphones, extended, hungry for the story that would dominate the evening news. They descended on the parents first, capturing tearful testimonies about children hurt and complaints ignored. They filmed the bruises with parents' permission, documenting evidence that would be impossible to dismiss. Then they turned to Marcus. "Mr. Brennan, can you tell us what happened yesterday?" Marcus looked into the camera, thought about Lily, thought about all the children who had suffered in silence, thought about every parent who had been threatened into compliance. "My daughter is 6 years old," he began. "Yesterday I walked into her classroom and found her teacher choking her, forcing her to say she was worthless, forcing her to believe that her dead mother left because she was bad." His voice cracked but held steady. "Victoria Harmon has been abusing children at this school for 15 years. The administration knew. The school board knew. They covered it up because Victoria's brother is Richard Harmon, the board chairman." "That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence?" "Look around you." Marcus gestured to the gathered parents. 17 families, 17 children with bruises and trauma and stories that have been ignored for years. How much more evidence do you need? The reporter's eyes gleamed. This was the story of her career, and she knew it. We've received reports that deputies are on their way to arrest members of your motorcycle club. Your response? We're standing on public property, exercising our right to free speech, supporting parents whose children have been abused. If Richard Harmon wants to arrest us for that, let him try. Let the whole country see what kind of man uses his power to protect a child abuser. The sound of sirens cut through the morning air. 4 sheriff's cruisers pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. Deputies emerged with hands on their belts, faces set in that particular expression of authority that Marcus had learned to recognize years ago. But they stopped short when they saw the cameras. 3 news crews, dozens of witnesses, parents clutching their children, and 200 iron wolves standing in silent, disciplined formation. The lead deputy, a thick-necked man with a gray mustache, surveyed the scene with obvious discomfort. This wasn't what he'd been told to expect. He'd been told to disperse a group of troublemaking bikers, not to walk into a media circus. "Who's in charge here?" he demanded. Gunner stepped forward. "That would be me, Gunner Morrison, president of the Iron Wolves." "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to need you and your people to vacate this property immediately." "On what grounds?" "You're disrupting school operations and intimidating staff." "Disrupting school operations?" Gunner's voice carried clearly, loud enough for the cameras to pick up every word. "We're standing in a parking lot. We haven't entered any building. We haven't threatened anyone. We're simply supporting parents who've come forward about abuse their children suffered at this school." "That's not what I was told." "I'm sure it isn't. I'm sure Richard Harmon told you we were a violent gang terrorizing innocent people. But take a look around, deputy." Gunner spread his arms. "Do you see any violence? Do you see any threats? All I see are parents demanding answers about why their children were hurt." The deputy's eyes flicked to the cameras, to the reporters furiously taking notes, to the parents watching with a mixture of fear and hope. He was trapped, and he knew it. "I'm going to need to speak with my supervisor," he said, finally retreating to his cruiser. The cameras caught every second of his retreat. Marcus allowed himself a small breath of relief. They'd won the first battle. But the war was just beginning. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You have no idea what you've started. Walk away now or lose everything. This is your only warning." Marcus showed the message to Gunner. "Richard Harmon. Probably, or someone working for him." Gunner's expression hardened. "Save that message. It's evidence of witness intimidation." He's scared. He should be. His whole empire is built on secrets and silence. We just blew the doors off both. The deputies left without making any arrests. The reporters stayed for another 2 hours, gathering testimony, filming evidence, conducting interviews. By noon, the story had gone national. Montana school accused of covering up years of child abuse. Motorcycle club rallies to support families of abused children. School board chairman's sister at center of abuse scandal. Marcus watched the headlines scroll across his phone screen, sitting in his truck with Lily finally awake and eating the sandwich Rachel had brought her. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small. "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby. We're not in trouble." "Then why were those police cars here?" Marcus set down his phone and looked at his daughter. Really looked at her. The bruises on her arms, the shadows under her eyes, the way she flinched every time a loud noise echoed across the parking lot. "Some people wanted to stop us from telling the truth," he said carefully. "They wanted to protect Mrs. Harmon, but we didn't let them." "Why would anyone want to protect her?" "She's mean." "Because her brother is very powerful. He has a lot of money and a lot of friends in important places. He thought that would be enough to keep everyone quiet." Lily considered this. "But the bikers aren't quiet," Marcus smiled. "No, they're not." "Good." Lily took another bite of her sandwich. "Mrs. Harmon should go to jail. She hurt me. She hurt my friends. She hurt a lot of kids." "She will, baby. I promise. She will." A knock on the truck window made them both jump. Marcus turned to see a woman in her 60s standing outside, her gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, her eyes red from crying. He rolled down the window. "Can I help you, Mr. Brennan?" Her voice shook. "My name is Susan Ramirez. I used to work at this school. I was a teacher here for 12 years. Used to. They forced me out. 5 years ago. Susan's hands twisted together. Because I tried to report Victoria Harmon. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Get in the truck. Susan climbed into the back seat, glancing nervously at Lily, before focusing on Marcus. I saw what she was doing. Susan said the words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. The bruises. The way children would cry when it was time for her class. The sudden behavioral changes. I documented everything. I filed reports. I went to Webb, to the superintendent, even to the school board. What happened? Richard Harmon happened. Susan's voice turned bitter. He called me into a meeting. Just the two of us. He had a file on me, performance reviews, student complaints, things I'd never even seen before. All negative, all fabricated. She pulled a crumpled tissue from her pocket and wiped her eyes. He told me that if I continued my vendetta against his sister, he would destroy my career. He said he would make sure I never worked in education again. He said he had documentation proving I was an incompetent teacher who was projecting my own failures onto a respected colleague. So you stopped. I should have kept fighting. Tears streamed down Susan's face. But I was scared. I had a mortgage. My husband had just been diagnosed with cancer. We needed my health insurance. I couldn't afford to lose everything. She looked at Lily with an expression of pure anguish. I told myself someone else would speak up. Someone braver. Someone with less to lose. Her voice broke completely. But no one did. And children kept getting hurt. Your daughter got hurt. Because I was too much of a coward to keep fighting. Lily leaned forward and touched Susan's hand. It's okay, she said softly. You're here now. Susan stared at the 6-year-old who had just offered her forgiveness she didn't deserve. I'll testify, Susan said, her voice suddenly steady. I'll tell everyone what I saw, what Richard Harmon did. I don't care what happens to me anymore. I should have done this years ago. Marcus reached back and squeezed her shoulder. You're doing it now. That's what matters. By 3 o'clock, the story had taken on a life of its own. Susan Ramirez wasn't the only former employee to come forward. 3 other teachers who had left Pinewood Elementary under mysterious circumstances reached out to the news crews. Each one had a similar story, witnessed abuse, reported it was threatened or forced out. The evidence was mounting. The wall of silence was crumbling, and Richard Harmon was about to make a desperate move. Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number again. He answered it. Mr. Brennan. The voice was smooth, cultured, dripping with false friendliness. This is Richard Harmon. I believe we need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Oh, I think you do, because I have something to say to you. A proposition that could make all of this unpleasantness disappear. Marcus gripped the phone tighter. I'm listening. Meet me at my office, downtown. 1 hour. Come alone. Why would I do that? Because I have information about your wife's death. Information the police never found. Information about why that drunk driver was on that road that night. The world tilted beneath Marcus's feet. What are you talking about? 1 hour, Mr. Brennan. Come alone, and we'll discuss how this all ends. The line went dead. Marcus sat frozen, staring at the phone in his hand. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Elena. The drunk driver. Information the police never found. For 3 years, he'd believed his wife's death was a random tragedy. A horrible accident. Wrong place, wrong time. But Richard Harmon's voice suggested something else entirely. Daddy. Lily's worried voice cut through his shock. What's wrong? Marcus forced himself to breathe, to think, to focus. Richard Harmon was a manipulator, a liar, a man who would say anything to protect his sister and his empire. This could easily be a trap, a desperate attempt to get Marcus alone, away from witnesses and cameras. But what if it wasn't? What if there was more to Elena's death than he'd ever known? He thought about his wife. Her smile. Her laugh. The way she'd held Lily in the hospital, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "She's perfect. She's absolutely perfect." He thought about the drunk driver who had stolen her from them. The man who had gotten 8 years and would be out in 4. He thought about Richard Harmon's smooth voice. Information the police never found. Marcus made a decision. He pulled out his phone and called Gunnar. I need to go somewhere, alone. That's a bad idea, brother. I know, but I don't have a choice. Marcus explained the phone call, the suggestion about Elena, the demand that he come alone, silence on the other end. Then, it's a trap. Probably. He's going to try to intimidate you, threaten you, maybe worse. Probably. And you're going anyway. If there's even a chance he knows something about Elena's death, I have to know what it is. Marcus's voice hardened. But I'm not stupid. I want you to give me 30 minutes. If I'm not out of his office by then, bring everyone. Marcus. 30 minutes. Gunnar, that's all I'm asking. Another long silence. You've got 30 minutes, not a second more. And Marcus, yeah, be careful. This man has spent his whole life destroying people who stood up to him. He's not going to stop now. Marcus ended the call and turned to Lily. Baby, I need you to stay with Rachel for a little while. Daddy has to go somewhere. Where? To talk to someone. I'll be back soon. Lily's eyes searched his face. At 6 years old, she couldn't fully understand what was happening. But she understood enough to be scared. Promise. Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead. I promise. 20 minutes later, he walked into the offices of Harmon Development, the real estate empire that Richard Harmon had built over 30 years of deals, threats, and strategic destruction of anyone who got in his way. The receptionist looked at him like he was something scraped off the bottom of a shoe. Do you have an appointment? Tell your boss Marcus Brennan is here. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or respect. She picked up the phone, murmured something into the receiver, and then nodded toward a door at the far end of the lobby. Mr. Harmon will see you now. Marcus walked through the door and into the office of the man who had protected a child abuser for 15 years. Richard Harmon sat behind a desk that probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. He was tall and thin, with silver hair swept back from a face that might have been handsome if not for the coldness in his eyes. Mr. Brennan, he gestured to a chair. Please sit. Marcus remained standing. You said you had information about my wife. Straight to business. I appreciate that. Richard leaned back in his chair. Let me be direct with you, Mr. Brennan. You've created quite a problem for me today. My sister's reputation is being destroyed on national television. My family's name is being dragged through the mud. Parents who should know better are making wild accusations based on the word of a motorcycle gang. Those accusations are based on physical evidence. Bruises, medical records, testimony from dozens of witnesses. Evidence can be discredited. Witnesses can be persuaded to recant. None of this had to become a public spectacle. Richard's eyes narrowed. But you've made that impossible now, so we need to find another way forward. There's only one way forward. Your sister goes to prison for what she's done. My sister is a dedicated educator who has been unfairly targeted by parents who refuse to accept responsibility for their own children's behavioral problems. Richard's voice was smooth as silk. But we're not here to debate that. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file folder. 3 years ago, your wife was killed by a drunk driver named Thomas Mercer. He received 8 years. He'll be eligible for parole in 4. A tragedy, certainly, but not an unusual one. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. Get to the point. Thomas Mercer had no reason to be on that road that night. He lived 40 miles away. He had no friends in the area, no family, no business. The police assumed he was simply drunk and lost. Richard opened the folder. But I have evidence that suggests otherwise. He slid a photograph across the desk. Marcus looked at it and felt his blood turn to ice. It showed Thomas Mercer standing outside a bar. Next to him was another man, shorter, heavier, with a bald head and a distinctive tattoo on his neck. Do you recognize the second man? Richard asked. Marcus shook his head, but something cold was forming in his stomach. His name is Vincent Cole. He's a problem solver. The kind of man people hire when they need something handled discreetly. Richard's voice dropped lower. 3 days before your wife's accident, Vincent Cole received a payment of $50,000 from an anonymous source. The day after your wife died, he left the country. He hasn't been back since. What are you saying? I'm saying that your wife's death may not have been an accident, Mr. Brennan. I'm saying that someone may have paid to have her killed. And I'm saying that I have information that could help you find out who. Marcus's mind raced. This couldn't be true. Elena's death was a tragedy, not a conspiracy. A drunk driver, a red light, a horrible mistake. But what if it wasn't? Why would anyone want to kill my wife? That's the question, isn't it? Richard closed the folder. Elena worked at the Veterans Hospital in Billings. She had access to medical records, pharmaceutical inventories, controlled substances. There were people who might have found that access inconvenient. Marcus stared at the folder, at the photograph, at the man who was offering him answers he'd never thought to ask for. What do you want? I want this circus to end. I want you to call off your motorcycle friends. I want the reporters to go away and the parents to stop talking. Richard's eyes bore into Marcus's. In exchange, I'll give you everything I have on Vincent Cole. Names, dates, financial records, everything you need to find out the truth about what happened to your wife. The offer hung in the air between them. Walk away. Let Victoria Harmon escape justice. And maybe, just maybe, find out who killed Elena. Or keep fighting. Put Victoria in prison. Protect other children from suffering what Lily suffered, but never know if his wife had been murdered. Marcus looked at the photograph one more time. Then he looked up at Richard Harmon. You're lying. Richard's expression flickered. Excuse me. This is a setup. You fabricated this evidence to manipulate me into backing off. You don't know anything about Elena's death. I assure you, Mr. Brennan, this information is completely legitimate. I have sources. You have nothing. Marcus stepped forward, and for the first time he saw fear flash across Richard Harmon's face. My wife died because a drunk got behind the wheel of a car. It was a tragedy, a random, horrible tragedy, and you thought you could use my grief to protect your monster of a sister. He leaned across the desk until his face was inches from Richard's. But here's what you don't understand about me. I spent 3 years putting my daughter first. 3 years learning to be patient, to think before I act, to do things the right way. And that daughter, the little girl your sister tortured for 4 months, stood up today and called Victoria a liar in front of the whole world. Marcus's voice dropped to a growl. If a 6-year-old can find that kind of courage, you think I'm going to fold because you wave some fake photographs at me. You think I'm going to abandon 17 families who are counting on me to help them get justice. He straightened up and headed for the door. Your sister is going to prison, Richard. Your cover-up is going to be exposed. And when the FBI finishes investigating your little empire, you'll probably be sharing a cell with her. You're making a mistake, Brennan. Richard's voice had lost its smoothness. It was sharp now, desperate. I will destroy you. I will take your daughter. I will burn everything you care about to the ground. Marcus stopped at the door and looked back. You can try. But you should know something about the Iron Wolves. When you threaten one of us, you threaten all of us. And there are 200 of us in this state alone. He opened the door. Thanks for the meeting, Richard. See you in court. Marcus walked out of the building and into the afternoon sun. His hands were shaking not from fear but from rage barely held in check. Richard Harmon had tried to manipulate him with false hope about Elena, had tried to use his grief as a weapon. Had threatened his daughter. The man had no idea what he'd just unleashed. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Gunnar. I'm out, and I've got news. Good news or bad news? Both. Harmon's scared. He tried to bribe me with fake evidence about Elena's death. When that didn't work, he threatened to take Lily. A long pause. When Gunnar spoke again, his voice was ice. He threatened your daughter. Yeah. Then this just became personal. The sound of motorcycle engines roared in the background. Get back here, brother. We've got planning to do, because Richard Harmon just declared war on the wrong family. Marcus ended the call and walked toward his truck. Behind him from the window of his office, Richard Harmon watched him go. His hands were shaking as he picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped he'd never have to use. "It's me," he said when the line connected. "I need your help. There's a problem that needs to disappear." He listened for a moment, then nodded. Yes, all of them. The father, the daughter, and especially the bikers. The war had officially begun. Marcus drove back to the school with Richard Harmon's threat echoing in his mind. "Take your daughter. Burn everything you care about." The words should have terrified him. Instead, they clarified everything. This wasn't just about Victoria Harmon anymore. This was about a man who had built his entire empire on intimidation and silence. A man who believed his money and connections made him untouchable. A man who had just made the mistake of threatening a child in front of a father who had nothing left to lose. Gunnar met him in the parking lot, his face carved from granite. "Tell me everything." Marcus relayed the conversation, the fake evidence about Elena, the photographs that were supposed to make him question whether his wife's death was an accident, the offer to trade justice for information, and finally, the threat. Gunnar listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, the older man was silent for a long moment. "He's desperate," Gunnar said finally. "A man like Richard Harmon doesn't make threats unless he's scared. He's been running this town for 30 years, and today, for the first time, someone stood up to him and didn't back down. He's going to come after us. All of us. Let him." Gunnar's eyes were cold. "We've faced worse than rich men with bruised egos, but we need to move fast. The longer this drags out, the more time he has to bury evidence and intimidate witnesses." Rachel appeared at Marcus's side, her phone in hand. "We've got movement. I just got a call from my contact at the FBI field office in Helena. They've been watching the Harmon family for months on an unrelated corruption investigation. When they saw the news coverage today, they reached out." "What kind of corruption?" "Kickbacks on school construction contracts, fraudulent billing, embezzlement of public funds." Rachel's voice carried a grim satisfaction. "Richard Harmon has been using his position on the school board to funnel millions into shell companies he controls. The FBI's been building a case for 2 years, but they could never get anyone to flip on him." "Until now," Marcus said. "Until now. They want to talk to Susan Ramirez and the other teachers who came forward. If they can prove Richard used his position to cover up his sister's abuse, it strengthens their existing case exponentially." "How soon can they get here?" "Tomorrow morning. They're sending a team from Helena overnight." Rachel paused. "But Marcus, there's something else. Something the FBI mentioned that you need to know." "What?" "Richard Harmon has connections to some very dangerous people. Not just local politicians and businessmen. We're talking organized crime, money laundering, the kind of men who make problems disappear permanently." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "You think he'd actually—" "I think a man who threatened your daughter in his own office isn't operating with a full deck anymore. He's cornered, scared. And scared men do desperate things." Gunnar stepped forward. "We're posting guards at Marcus's house tonight. 4 men on rotating shifts. Nobody gets near Lily without going through us first." "Gunnar, I can't ask." "You're not asking. I'm telling." Gunnar's voice brooked no argument. "That little girl stood up today and showed more courage than most adults have in their entire lives. We protect our own Marcus. And whether you've been riding with us or not, you and Lily are family." Marcus swallowed hard against the lump in his throat. 3 years ago, he'd walked away from the Iron Wolves because he thought his daughter needed a father more than a biker. Now he understood what he should have known all along. Being a biker and being a father weren't mutually exclusive. The men standing around him, these brothers he'd left behind, they were fathers too. Grandfathers. Uncles. Men who understood that protecting children was the most important thing a person could do. "Thank you," he managed. "Thank us when this is over." Gunnar clapped him on the shoulder. "Now let's get to work. We've got evidence to gather and a case to build." The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Iron Wolves spread out across the county, tracking down former students and parents who might have information about Victoria Harmon's history of abuse. They worked in pairs, approaching families with respect and sensitivity, explaining what had happened and asking if they'd be willing to share their stories. The response was overwhelming. By midnight, they had documented 47 cases spanning 15 years. 47 children who had been hurt. 47 families who had been silenced, threatened, or simply ignored. The youngest victim was 5 years old when the abuse began. The oldest was 12. Some had physical evidence, photographs of bruises, medical records documenting injuries. Others had only their memories, painful and vivid even years later. Marcus sat at his kitchen table at 2 in the morning reading through the testimonies that Rachel had compiled. Each one was worse than the last. A boy who had been locked in a closet for 3 hours because he asked to use the bathroom during a lesson. A girl who had been forced to stand in front of the class and repeat, "I am stupid," until she collapsed from exhaustion. A child who had been denied food as punishment, forced to watch his classmates eat lunch while he sat with an empty tray. And through it all, Victoria Harmon had been protected. Complaints were dismissed. Parents were threatened. Teachers who spoke up were forced out. Richard Harmon's influence had created an impenetrable shield around his sister, allowing her to prey on children for over a decade. How did this go on so long? Marcus whispered to himself. How did nobody stop her? Because the people who should have stopped her chose their careers over kids. Marcus looked up to find Susan Ramirez standing in his kitchen doorway. He'd offered her the guest room after she'd admitted she was afraid to go home, afraid Richard Harmon might send someone to silence her permanently. I asked myself that question every day for 5 years. Susan continued, sinking into a chair across from him. How did I let it happen? How did I walk away when I knew children were being hurt? You tried. You filed reports. I didn't try hard enough. Susan's voice cracked. I should have gone to the media, to the police, to anyone who would listen. Instead, I let Richard Harmon scare me into silence, and children paid the price. You're here now. You're making it right. It doesn't feel like enough. Susan wiped her eyes. That little girl Lily, she looked at me today and said, "It's okay. You're here now." Like I deserved forgiveness. Like my cowardice didn't contribute to her suffering. Kids see things more clearly than adults sometimes, Marcus said quietly. They don't hold on to anger the way we do. They just want to know they're safe. Is she safe, I mean? Marcus thought about the 4 iron wolves stationed around his house, about the FBI agents arriving in the morning, about the war that Richard Harmon had declared. She will be, he said. I'll make sure of it. A soft knock at the door made them both jump. Marcus was on his feet instantly, hand reaching for the baseball bat he'd placed beside the kitchen counter. It's me, brother. Gunner's voice came through the door. We've got a situation. Marcus opened the door to find Gunner and Rachel standing on his porch, their faces grave. What happened? Principal Webb just called Rachel, Gunner said. He wants to flip. Marcus blinked. Webb, the man who's been covering for Victoria for 15 years. The same. Rachel pulled out her phone. He left a voicemail 20 minutes ago. Says Richard Harmon called him tonight and told him to destroy all records of complaints against Victoria. Shred everything. Delete emails. Make it disappear. And he's refusing. He's terrified. Said Richard also told him to prepare a statement claiming all the parents are lying, that the bruises were fabricated, that the Iron Wolves threatened families into making false accusations. Rachel's voice tightened. Webb said he can't do it anymore. He can't keep lying to protect a child abuser. Why now? Why after 15 years of silence? Because he saw those children today, Gunner said. Saw the bruises, heard the testimonies. He said watching Victoria stand there and deny everything while kids cried in the parking lot broke something in him. Marcus processed this information. Douglas Webb had been complicit in years of abuse. He'd ignored complaints, silenced parents, protected a predator. By any measure, he was a villain in this story. But he was also a potential witness. Someone who could confirm the systematic cover-up. Someone who could testify about Richard Harmon's direct involvement in protecting his sister. What does he want? Marcus asked. Protection, immunity, a chance to tell the truth without going to prison. Rachel's expression was conflicted. I told him I couldn't make any promises. But I also told him the FBI would be very interested in hearing what he has to say. He doesn't deserve immunity, Susan said from behind Marcus. He let children suffer for 15 years. He should face consequences. Maybe, Gunner acknowledged. But if his testimony brings down Richard Harmon and puts Victoria away for good, it might be worth the trade. Marcus thought about Lily sleeping in the next room, about the 47 children whose lives had been damaged by Victoria's abuse and the system's failure to stop her. "Set up a meeting," he said finally. "But not here. Somewhere public. Somewhere Richard Harmon's people can't get to him or us." "I know a place," Gunnar said. "There's a diner on Route 12 about 20 miles outside town. Neutral territory. The owner's an old friend. He'll make sure we're not disturbed. Tomorrow morning, before the FBI arrives, I want to hear what Webb has to say before we hand him over to the feds." Gunnar nodded. "I'll make the call." Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in a chair outside Lily's bedroom, listening to her breathe, thinking about everything that had happened and everything still to come. At 6 in the morning, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He tensed, expecting another threat from Richard Harmon. Instead, it was a video file. No message. No explanation. Just a video. Marcus opened it and felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The footage was grainy, clearly from a security camera. It showed Victoria Harmon's classroom. The timestamp read 3 months ago. In the video, Victoria had a boy by the collar of his shirt. She was shaking him so hard his head snapped back and forth like a rag doll. The audio was faint, but audible. "You worthless piece of garbage!" Victoria screamed. "You think you can embarrass me? You think anyone will believe you over me?" She threw the boy against the wall. He crumpled to the floor, sobbing. Victoria walked to her desk, calm and composed, and picked up a cup of coffee. She sipped it while the boy lay crying on the floor. "Get up," she said coldly. "Get up and go back to your seat. And if you ever tell anyone about this, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life." The video ended. Marcus's hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. This was proof. Undeniable documented proof of Victoria Harmon physically assaulting a student. The kind of evidence that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. But where had it come from? His phone buzzed again. Another text from the same number. "There are more videos, dozens of them. Victoria Harmon has been caught on camera abusing students for years. The footage was supposed to be deleted after 30 days, but someone made copies. Someone who wanted insurance in case things ever went wrong." Marcus stared at the message. Who is this? Someone who's tired of being complicit. Someone who wants to see Richard Harmon finally pay for what he's done. "Why are you sending this to me?" "Because you're the only one who can't be bought or intimidated. You're the only one who will see this through to the end." "How do I know this isn't a trap?" "You don't. But ask yourself this. Would Richard Harmon send you evidence that proves his sister is a monster? Would he give you the ammunition to destroy everything he spent 30 years building?" The logic was sound. This wasn't coming from Richard Harmon. It was coming from someone inside his organization. Someone who had been keeping secrets and was finally ready to expose them. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing. Just justice. Make sure Victoria Harmon never hurts another child. Make sure Richard Harmon loses everything. That's all I want." A final message appeared. "Check your email. You'll find a link to a secure server. All the videos are there. Every piece of evidence you need. Use it wisely." Marcus opened his email. There it was, a link to a server he'd never heard of, along with a username and password. He clicked the link and found himself staring at a folder containing 127 video files, each one labeled with a date and a student's initials. 127 videos. Years of documented abuse. Proof that Victoria Harmon was not just a strict teacher with questionable methods, but a genuine predator who had systematically tortured children while the system looked the other way. This changed everything. Marcus forwarded the link to Rachel with a single message: "Call the FBI. Tell them to bring a bigger team." The meeting with Douglas Webb happened at 7:30 that morning. The diner was nearly empty, just a few truckers nursing coffee at the counter and an elderly couple sharing a plate of eggs in the corner. Marcus sat in a booth at the back, Gunnar beside him watching the door. Webb arrived alone, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling as he slid into the seat across from them. "Thank you for meeting me." he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know I don't deserve your trust. You're right, Marcus replied. You don't. But we're here anyway. Talk. Webb took a shaky breath. Richard Harmon has been controlling this school district for 22 years. He decides who gets hired, who gets fired, who gets promoted. Nothing happens without his approval. And Victoria is his weapon. Webb's face twisted with disgust. Whether at Victoria or himself, Marcus couldn't tell. She targets certain children. Quiet ones. Kids from single-parent homes or military families. Kids whose parents work multiple jobs and can't monitor their school experience closely. Why those children specifically? Because they're vulnerable. Because they're less likely to be believed if they report abuse. Because their parents are less likely to have the resources to fight back. Webb's voice cracked. Richard identified them. He would send Victoria a list at the beginning of each school year. Children from families he wanted to control or families he thought might cause trouble. Marcus felt sick. He targeted specific children for abuse. Not directly. Victoria chose how to handle them, but Richard made sure she had access to the most vulnerable kids in the district. Webb wiped his eyes. It wasn't random. It was systematic. A way to keep families afraid and compliant. Why? Gunnar demanded. What did he gain from terrorizing children? Control, power. Richard Harmon doesn't just want money, he wants to own this town. Every family, every business, every institution. When you have something on people, when you've hurt their children and they've stayed silent about it, they'll do anything you ask. Vote the way you want. Support your candidates. Look the other way when you break the law. Marcus thought about the construction contracts Rachel had mentioned, the embezzlement, the corruption. Richard Harmon had built an empire on the backs of terrorized children and their silenced parents. The videos, Marcus said. Who's been keeping copies of the security footage? Webb looked up sharply. What videos? Someone sent me footage this morning. Victoria abusing a student. They said there are dozens more. The color drained from Webb's face. That's impossible. Richard has all the security footage destroyed after 30 days. He's paranoid about leaving evidence. Apparently, someone's been keeping copies, someone who wanted insurance. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then understanding dawned in his eyes. Janet. Who's Janet? Janet Morrison, the school's IT administrator. She's worked for the district for 12 years. She's the one who handles the security system, the data backups, everything digital. You think she's the one who's been saving the videos? It makes sense. Janet's daughter was one of Victoria's victims 8 years ago. The girl's never been the same. Janet tried to file a complaint, but Richard shut her down. Threatened her job, her pension, everything. Marcus felt a spark of hope. Where can I find her? She lives on Cedar Street, number 47. But Marcus... Webb leaned forward urgently. If Richard finds out Janet's been keeping evidence, he'll destroy her. He'll destroy anyone who threatens his control. Then we need to get to her before he does. Marcus was on his feet before Webb finished speaking. Gunnar was right behind him. Wait, Webb called. What about me? What happens now? Marcus paused at the door. The FBI will be here in a few hours. You can either wait for them and tell them everything you know, or you can run and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. And if I cooperate, then maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to live with yourself someday. Marcus walked out without looking back. Janet Morrison lived in a modest house with a chain-link fence and a garden that had seen better days. Marcus knocked on the door while Gunnar stood watch at the gate. The woman who answered was in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and eyes that held the kind of weariness that came from years of carrying a burden too heavy to set down. Mrs. Morrison, Janet Morrison. She looked at him with recognition. You're the biker, the one from the news, the father who found his daughter being hurt. Yes, ma'am. I saw what you did yesterday, standing up to them. Finally, someone with the courage to stand up. Her voice shook. My Sarah was in Victoria Harmon's class 8 years ago. She was 7 years old. I know. That's why I'm here. Janet's eyes widened. You know, someone sent me videos this morning. Security footage of Victoria abusing students, footage that was supposed to be destroyed. Marcus held her gaze. Was it you? For a long moment, Janet didn't move, didn't speak. Then her face crumpled and tears began streaming down her cheeks. I've been waiting 8 years for someone to ask me that question, she whispered. 8 years of keeping those files hidden, knowing what they contained, praying that someday someone would come along who could actually use them. Why didn't you release them yourself? Because Richard Harmon would have destroyed me, destroyed my family, my other children, everything I have. Janet's voice broke. I'm not brave like you. I'm just a mother who watched her daughter get hurt and couldn't do anything to stop it. You kept the evidence. You saved it when everyone else was destroying it. That took courage. It took cowardice. Janet shook her head bitterly. Courage would have been releasing those videos years ago. Courage would have been standing up like you did no matter the cost. Instead, I hid in the shadows and waited for someone else to fight my battles. The battle's happening now, Marcus said gently, and we need your help to win it. Janet studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped aside and gestured for him to enter. I have everything, she said as she led him through the house. Every video, every deleted email, every document Richard Harmon thought was destroyed. I've been building a file for 8 years, waiting for the day when someone would finally listen. She opened a closet door and pulled out a fireproof safe. Inside were dozens of USB drives carefully labeled and organized. This is everything, Janet said, handing Marcus the drives. Enough evidence to put Victoria Harmon away for life and send her brother to federal prison. Enough to expose the entire corrupt system they've built. Marcus held the drives like they were made of gold. Why me? Why now? Because I saw your daughter yesterday. Saw her stand up and call Victoria a liar. A 6-year-old girl with more courage than I've had in my entire life. Janet's voice hardened. If that little girl can find the strength to fight back, so can I. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. FBI is here. They need you back at the school. Now. He looked at Janet. Will you come with me? Tell the FBI what you know. Janet took a deep breath. Looked at the USB drives in Marcus's hands. Looked at the photographs of her daughter that lined the walls Sarah at 7, smiling and innocent before Victoria Harmon had stolen that smile forever. Yes, she said finally. I'll tell them everything. They drove back to Pinewood Elementary together. Janet sat in the passenger seat, clutching the fireproof safe to her chest like a shield, while Marcus's mind raced through everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. What had started as one father's discovery of his daughter's abuse had become something much bigger. A conspiracy that stretched back 15 years. A corrupt system that had victimized dozens of children. A powerful man who had built his empire on silence and fear. And now finally, that silence was breaking. The FBI team was waiting in the school parking lot, 6 agents in dark suits, their expressions grim and focused. Rachel stood with them, along with Gunner and a dozen iron wolves who had refused to leave despite the official presence. Special Agent Catherine Torres approached as Marcus stepped out of his truck. Mr. Brennan, I'm the lead agent on this investigation. I understand you have evidence for us. Marcus handed her the USB drives. 127 videos of Victoria Harmon abusing students over a 15-year period, plus emails, documents, and financial records linking Richard Harmon to the cover-up. Torres's eyebrows rose. That's considerably more than we expected. This is Janet Morrison. She's the one who saved everything. She's ready to testify. Torres turned to Janet with what might have been respect. Mrs. Morrison, would you come with us? We have a lot of questions. Janet nodded, her grip still tight on the safe. But before she followed the agents, she turned back to Marcus. Thank you, she said softly, for giving me a reason to stop being afraid. Marcus watched her go, feeling the weight of the moment settle around him. This was it. The evidence was in the hands of people who could actually do something with it. The conspiracy was unraveling. Justice was finally within reach. His phone rang. Unknown number. Marcus answered, expecting another anonymous tip. Instead, he heard Lily's voice trembling with terror. Daddy, there's a man here. He says if you don't stop, he's going to... The line went dead. Marcus's blood turned to ice. He looked at Gunner, who had seen his expression change. What is it? Lily. The word came out strangled. Someone has Lily. Marcus was running before his mind caught up with his body. His truck, his keys, his daughter. Nothing else existed. Gunnar grabbed his arm and spun him around. Marcus, stop. Think. They have my daughter. Marcus's voice cracked on the word. You have to calm down and use your head. Gunnar's grip tightened. Charging in blind is exactly what they want. It's how people get killed. It's how children get killed. The words hit Marcus like a bucket of ice water. He stopped struggling, forced himself to breathe. What do I do? His voice came out broken. Gunnar, tell me what to do. First, we find out where she is. Can you call back that number? Marcus's hands shook as he pulled out his phone and hit redial. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice answered. Not Lily's. A man's voice, cold and professional. Mr. Brennan, I was wondering how long it would take you to call back. Where is my daughter? She's safe, for now. Whether she stays that way depends entirely on you. If you hurt her, I swear to God. Threats won't help anyone, Mr. Brennan, especially not your little girl. The man's voice remained calm, almost bored. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away from this investigation. You're going to tell the FBI that you fabricated the evidence. You're going to publicly apologize to Victoria Harmon and Richard Harmon for the damage you've caused to their reputations. And if I don't, then your daughter will disappear, permanently, no body, no closure, just a lifetime of wondering what happened to her. Marcus felt his knees buckle. Gunnar caught him, kept him upright. I need proof she's alive, Marcus managed. I need to hear her voice again. A pause, then shuffling sounds, then Lily's voice small and terrified. Daddy. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm scared. Daddy, the man says I have to be quiet or... The phone was pulled away. The man's voice returned. Satisfied, now you have 2 hours to make this go away. Call the FBI. Tell them you lied. Do it publicly on camera so there's no question. 2 hours isn't enough time to... Then I suggest you work quickly. Your daughter's life depends on it. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone in his hand. 2 hours. 120 minutes to save his daughter's life. Agent Torres appeared at his side. Mr. Brennan, what's happening? They took Lily. The words felt like glass in his throat. Richard Harmon's people. They took my daughter and they're going to kill her if I don't recant everything. Torres' face hardened. When did this happen? Just now. She called from my house. The guards. Marcus's eyes went wide. The guards. Gunnar, the men you posted at my house. Gunnar was already on his phone barking orders. A moment later, his face went pale. They're not responding. Any of them. Oh God. Marcus started running again, this time toward his truck. Oh God. Oh God. Marcus, wait, Torres shouted. We need to coordinate. If you go charging in... But Marcus was already in his truck engine roaring to life. He peeled out of the parking lot tires, screaming against asphalt. Behind him, 200 motorcycles roared to life. The ride to his house took 7 minutes. The longest 7 minutes of Marcus's life. Every second stretched into an eternity of fear and rage and desperate prayer. Please let her be alive. Please let her be alive. Please. He turned onto his street and his heart stopped. His front door stood open. The porch light was shattered. And on the lawn, face down in the grass, lay one of the Iron Wolf's guards. Marcus slammed on the brakes and was out of the truck before it fully stopped. He dropped to his knees beside the fallen man Derek, a veteran who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Derek. Derek. The man groaned. His eyes fluttered open. Blood matted his hair from a wound on the back of his head. They came out of nowhere, Derek mumbled. 4 of them, professional. Had us down before we could react. Where did they take her? I don't know. I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry. Gunnar's motorcycle screamed to a halt behind Marcus's truck. Within seconds, the street was filled with Iron Wolves, 200 strong, their engines a thunderous chorus of fury. Spread out, Gunnar commanded. Check every room. Look for anything that tells us where they went. Marcus ran inside. The house had been torn apart, furniture overturned, pictures knocked from walls, signs of a struggle in Lily's bedroom, her blankets thrown on the floor, her stuffed animals scattered, and on her pillow a single piece of paper. Marcus snatched it up with trembling hands. "You were warned," the note read. "Now watch everything you love disappear." Something broke inside Marcus Brennan, something he'd kept carefully contained for 3 years, ever since he'd hung up his vest and tried to become a different man. Something dark and dangerous and utterly without mercy. He walked out of his daughter's bedroom and found Gunnar waiting in the hallway. "Did you find anything?" They left a note. Threats. Marcus's voice had changed. Colder. Harder. "Gunnar, I need you to find out where Richard Harmon is right now. Marcus, if you go after him directly. He took my daughter." Marcus met Gunnar's eyes. "He declared war on my family. I'm going to finish it." The FBI. "The FBI will build a case, file paperwork, follow procedures. By the time they get through the red tape, Lily could be dead." Marcus stepped closer. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for help. Where is Richard Harmon?" Gunnar studied him for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Tommy, I need you to track a location for me. Richard Harmon, chairman of the Copper Ridge School Board. Find out where he is right now and call me back." He ended the call and looked at Marcus. "You understand what you're doing. If we go after Harmon directly, there's no coming back from that. The law won't protect us. The media won't support us. We'll be the villains in this story." "I don't care about the story. I care about my daughter." "So do we." Gunnar's voice softened. "That little girl is family, Marcus. Every man out there feels the same way. But we need to be smart about this. We need to find out where they're keeping her before we make any moves." Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from the same unknown number as before, the anonymous source who had sent the videos. "Harmon has a property outside town. Old hunting lodge. Private security. That's where they take people they want to disappear." Marcus showed Gunnar the message. "You trust this source? They gave us the videos. They've been right so far." Marcus's jaw tightened. "It's the only lead we have." Gunnar's phone rang. He answered, listened, then nodded slowly. "That's confirmed. Tommy just tracked Harmon's car to a property on Miller Road, 20 miles north of town. Matches what your source said." "Then that's where we go." Gunnar turned to face the assembled Iron Wolves, 200 men and women standing in formation waiting for orders. "Brothers and sisters," he called out, "a child has been taken, one of our own. Richard Harmon thinks he can threaten a 6-year-old girl and face no consequences. He thinks his money and his power make him untouchable." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We're going to show him how wrong he is. We ride for Miller Road. We get that little girl back. And we make sure Richard Harmon understands that there are some lines you don't cross." A roar went up from the crowd. Not words, just pure primal fury. Marcus climbed onto the back of Gunnar's bike. His truck would be too slow for what came next. "Let's go get my daughter." 200 engines roared to life in unison. The sound shook windows and rattled doors for half a mile in every direction. The Iron Wolves rode to war. The road to Miller Lodge wound through dense forest, climbing steadily into the mountains. Marcus gripped Gunnar's waist as the bike leaned into curves, his mind racing faster than the engine beneath him. What would they find when they got there? Would Lily still be alive? Would Richard Harmon be waiting with an army of private security? Would this end in rescue or bloodshed? He didn't know. He couldn't know. All he could do was ride and pray and prepare himself for whatever came next. 15 miles out, Gunnar's phone buzzed against his chest. He pulled over the entire column, stopping behind him. "What is it?" Gunnar checked the message and his face changed. "FBI, Agent Torres tracked our location. She's demanding we stand down and let law enforcement handle this." "What did you tell her?" "I haven't told her anything yet." Gunnar met Marcus's eyes. "But she's right, Marcus. If we assault that property without authorization, we're committing multiple felonies, breaking and entering, assault, maybe worse depending on what happens. And if we wait for the FBI to get warrants and coordinate a response, my daughter dies. Maybe. Or maybe they negotiate. Maybe they find another way. Marcus thought about Lily's voice on the phone. The terror in every syllable. The threat that she would disappear permanently. I can't take that chance. I know. Gunnar pocketed his phone. Neither can we. He turned to the waiting bikers and raised his fist, the signal to move. The column surged forward. 5 miles from the lodge, they spotted the first security checkpoint, a black SUV parked across the road. 2 men in dark clothes standing beside it. The men saw the approaching motorcycles and reached for their weapons. They were too slow. The iron wolves swept around the SUV like a river around a stone. Rachel and 3 other riders broke off and disabled the vehicle tires, slashed, engine, disabled weapons, confiscated before the guards could even process what was happening. Don't kill them, Gunnar ordered. Just make sure they can't warn anyone. Zip ties secured the guards' hands behind their backs. Their phones and radios were smashed. They were left by the roadside helpless but alive. The column pressed on. 2 miles out, Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Brennan. The same cold voice from before. I see you've made your choice. That's unfortunate. For your daughter. I'm coming for her. And when I find her, I'm going to make you wish you'd never been born. Bold words from a man who doesn't understand the situation. The voice turned smug. We've been monitoring your approach since you left town. We know exactly how many of you there are. We know exactly when you'll arrive, and we've taken precautions. What kind of precautions? The kind that ensure, even if you somehow make it past our security, you'll never leave this property alive. Neither will your daughter. The line went dead. Marcus felt cold sweat break out across his back. This wasn't a bluff. Richard Harmon had planned for this. He'd known Marcus would come. He'd set a trap. Gunnar, we need to stop. Gunnar pulled over, concern etched on his face. What is it? They know we're coming. They've been watching us the whole time. He said they've taken precautions. Marcus's mind raced. If we ride in there like we planned, we're riding into an ambush. Then what do we do? Marcus thought about the layout of the property, the hunting lodge, the forest surrounding it, the roads that led in and out. We split up. Half the group approaches from the front, loud, visible, obvious. They'll draw all the attention. The other half circles around through the forest, hits them from behind while they're focused on the main force. A diversion. More than that, the front group doesn't engage. They just hold position, make noise, keep security focused on them. Meanwhile, a small team, me, Rachel, 2 or 3 others, slips in the back and finds Lily. Gunnar considered the plan. It could work, but if they're expecting us, they might have the whole property covered. They might, but they're expecting a frontal assault. Bikers charging in looking for a fight. They're not expecting surgical. They're not expecting smart. Since when did you become a tactician? Since my daughter's life started depending on it. Gunnar nodded slowly. All right, we do it your way. He turned to the assembled bikers and began issuing orders, dividing the group into 2 forces. Marcus pulled Rachel aside. I need you with me on this. Wouldn't have it any other way. Rachel checked the weapon at her hip, a legal concealed carry she'd held for years. What's the plan once we're inside? Find Lily. Get her out. Nothing else matters. And if Richard Harmon gets in the way... Marcus's face hardened. Then Richard Harmon learns what happens when you threaten a father's child. The plan came together in minutes. 150 iron wolves would approach from the main road, engines roaring, making as much noise as possible. They would stop just short of the property line and hold position, creating the impression of an imminent attack. Meanwhile, Marcus, Rachel, and 4 other volunteers would circle through the forest on foot, approaching the lodge from the rear. Their goal was simple: locate Lily and extract her before anyone knew they were there. It was risky. It was desperate. It was the only chance they had. Marcus ditched his motorcycle and set off through the trees with his small team. The forest was thick and dark, the afternoon sun barely penetrating the canopy overhead. They moved quickly but quietly, years of experience guiding their steps. As they approached the property, Marcus heard the distant rumble of motorcycle engines. The main force had arrived. The diversion was beginning. "This way," Rachel whispered, pointing toward a gap in the fence surrounding the lodge. "Looks like a service entrance, probably less guarded than the main gate." They slipped through the gap one by one. The grounds beyond were eerily quiet. Marcus could see the lodge ahead, a sprawling structure of log and stone and several smaller buildings scattered around it. "Where would they keep her?" he murmured. "Basement, probably. Or one of the outbuildings, somewhere isolated." Rachel scanned the area. "There, that shed near the back. It's got a padlock on the door and no windows. Good place to stash a prisoner." They crept toward the shed, staying low, using every bit of cover they could find. Marcus's heart pounded so loud he was sure the guards could hear it. 50 feet from the shed. 40. 30. A door opened somewhere behind them. Voices. Footsteps. "Down!" Rachel hissed. They dropped flat, pressing themselves into the dirt. 2 guards walked past close enough that Marcus could have reached out and touched them. "Boss says to stay alert," one guard was saying. "The bikers might try something stupid." "Let them try. We've got enough firepower to take down an army. Still watch the perimeter. Can't be too careful." The guards moved on, their voices fading into the distance. Marcus let out a slow breath and pushed himself up. "Let's go." They covered the remaining distance in seconds. Rachel pulled out a small toolkit and went to work on the padlock while Marcus kept watch. "Almost got it," she muttered. "These old locks aren't hard to click." The padlock fell away. Rachel eased the door open. Inside, huddled in the corner of the dark space, was Lily. "Daddy!" She launched herself into Marcus's arms, her small body shaking with sobs. He caught her and held her tight, feeling tears stream down his own face. "I've got you, baby. I've got you. You're safe now." "I was so scared. The man said you weren't coming. He said nobody would save me." "He was wrong. I will always come for you. Always." Rachel touched his shoulder. "Marcus, we need to move. Now." He nodded, lifting Lily onto his hip. She clung to him like she would never let go. They slipped back out of the shed and started toward the fence line. 20 feet to freedom. 15. 10. "Stop right there." The voice came from behind them. Cold, familiar. Marcus turned slowly. Richard Harmon stood 10 feet away, a gun in his hand, flanked by 4 armed guards. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" Richard's smile was thin and cruel. "I've been watching you since you entered the property. I wanted to see how far you'd get." "Let us go," Marcus said quietly. "You've lost Richard. The FBI has all the evidence. Your sister is finished. Your empire is crumbling. Hurting us won't change any of that." "Maybe not, but it will make me feel better." Richard raised the gun, pointing it directly at Marcus's chest. "You should have taken my deal when I offered it. You should have walked away." "I don't walk away from people who hurt children. Noble. Stupid, but noble." Then Richard's finger tightened on the trigger. "Say goodbye to your daughter, Mr. Brennan." A shot rang out. Marcus flinched, waiting for the impact. It never came. Instead, Richard Harmon stumbled backward, his gun clattering to the ground, his hand clutching his shoulder where blood was beginning to spread. Behind him, emerging from the shadows, was Agent Torres. Her weapon still raised, her face set in grim determination. "Richard Harmon, you're under arrest for kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, and about a dozen other charges we'll figure out once we get you back to headquarters." Richard stared at her in disbelief. "How? Did you really think we wouldn't track your location the moment we knew a child had been taken?" Torres shook her head. "We've had eyes on this property for an hour. We were just waiting for the right moment to move in." FBI agents emerged from the tree lines surrounding the guards, disarming them one by one. Helicopters appeared overhead, their searchlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Richard Harmon fell to his knees, his face contorted with rage and pain. "This isn't over," he spat. "I have lawyers. I have connections. You can't prove. We have 127 videos of your sister abusing children. We have testimony from dozens of witnesses. We have financial records linking you to the cover-up. We have everything, Mr. Harmon. Torres holstered her weapon. It's over. You're done. Marcus watched as agents handcuffed Richard Harmon and led him away. The man who had terrorized an entire community for 30 years. The man who had protected a monster and destroyed anyone who tried to stop him. The man who had kidnapped a 6-year-old girl to save his crumbling empire. Reduced to a bleeding handcuffed prisoner being stuffed into the back of a federal vehicle. Daddy! Lily's voice was small against his shoulder. Is it over now? Is the bad man going away? Marcus held her tighter, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Yes, baby. The bad man is going away. He's never going to hurt anyone again. Gunnar appeared at his side, having made his way in from the front lines once the FBI took control. Hell of a thing, brother, Gunnar said quietly. Hell of a thing. I couldn't have done it without you, without any of you. Marcus looked at the iron wolves gathering around them, 200 men and women who had ridden to war for a little girl they barely knew. How do I even begin to thank you? You don't have to. Gunnar placed a hand on his shoulder. That's what family does. We show up. We protect each other. We fight for what's right. Agent Torres approached them, her expression softer than Marcus had seen before. Mr. Brennan, your daughter needs to be checked out by medical personnel. We have an ambulance standing by. Is she hurt? Doesn't appear to be. But we want to make sure. Torres hesitated. I also want to say, what you did today was incredibly reckless. You could have gotten yourself killed. You could have gotten your daughter killed. I know. But you also helped us take down one of the most corrupt men in the state. The evidence Janet Morrison provided, combined with what we gathered tonight, Richard Harmon is going to prison for a very long time. So is his sister. Marcus nodded slowly. What happens now? Now we process the scene, collect evidence, build the case. It'll take months, probably longer. But the outcome isn't in doubt. Torres almost smiled. Justice is coming, Mr. Brennan. Thanks to you. Marcus carried Lily to the waiting ambulance where paramedics checked her over gently, finding no serious injuries beyond some minor bruises and severe psychological trauma that would take time to heal. As they worked, Marcus sat beside his daughter, holding her hand, watching the FBI agents swarm over the property that had almost become her grave. Daddy! Lily's voice was drowsy now, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Yeah, baby. Mrs. Harmon is going to jail too, right? She can't hurt any more kids. That's right. She's going to jail for a very long time. Good. Lily's eyes drifted closed. I hope she has nightmares, like the ones she gave me. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. His 6-year-old daughter, who should be worried about nothing more serious than which cartoon to watch, or which color crayon to use, had been forced to understand evil in ways no child ever should. But she had survived. She had stood up to her abuser. She had shown more courage than adults 3 times her age. And she would heal. Marcus would make sure of that. Whatever it took, however long it took, he would help his daughter find her way back to the light. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Marcus looked out at the colors and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. The battle was over. Richard Harmon was in custody. Victoria Harmon would soon follow. The system that had protected them for 15 years was crumbling, exposed by the courage of parents and children who had finally found their voices. But Marcus knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. There were still trials to face, testimonies to give, a community to heal. And somewhere waiting for its moment was the legacy that would rise from all this pain. A legacy that would protect children for generations to come. The trial began 6 weeks later, and the whole nation was watching. Marcus sat in the front row of the courtroom. Lily's hand clasped firmly in his own. She had asked to be here. She had insisted, actually, with a determination that reminded him so much of Elena, it made his chest ache. I want to see her face when they say guilty, Lily had told him the night before. I want her to know I'm not scared anymore. So here they were, surrounded by the families of 47 other victims waiting for justice that had been 15 years in the making. Victoria Harmon sat at the defense table, her face a mask of controlled indignation. She had refused all plea bargains. She had insisted on her innocence with the fervor of someone who genuinely believed she had done nothing wrong. Her lawyers had argued that she was a dedicated educator using tough love to help struggling students. The prosecution had responded with 127 videos. One by one, over the course of 3 weeks, the jury had watched Victoria Harmon choke children, throw them against walls, force them to repeat degrading phrases, deny them food, lock them in closets. They had heard testimony from victims, now grown their voices shaking as they described the terror that still haunted their nightmares. They had heard from Susan Ramirez, the teacher who had tried to report Victoria years ago and been forced out for her trouble. They had heard from Janet Morrison, the IT administrator, who had secretly saved the evidence that would eventually bring down an empire of abuse. And they had heard from Lily. Marcus would never forget watching his 6-year-old daughter take the witness stand. She had looked so small in that chair, her feet not even reaching the floor. But her voice had been steady as she described what Victoria had done to her. She said I was worthless, Lily had testified. She said my daddy would give me away if I told anyone. She said my mommy went to heaven because I was bad. The courtroom had gone completely silent. Several jurors had tears streaming down their faces. But that was a lie. Lily had continued, her eyes finding Marcus in the crowd. My daddy came for me. He always comes for me. And my mommy didn't leave because I was bad. She went to heaven because a bad man made a mistake, not because of me. She had turned to look directly at Victoria Harmon. You're the bad one. You hurt kids because it made you feel powerful. But you're not powerful. You're just mean. And mean people always get caught eventually. Victoria's mask had cracked for just a moment. A flash of pure hatred crossed her face before she forced it back into neutrality. But the jury had seen it. Everyone had seen it. Now 3 weeks later, they waited for the verdict. The jury had been deliberating for 2 days. 2 days of agonizing uncertainty. 2 days of Marcus pacing his living room at 3 a.m, wondering if somehow, despite everything, Victoria Harmon would walk free. The door to the jury room opened. 12 people filed out, their faces solemn and unreadable. Marcus's grip on Lily's hand tightened. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. The forewoman stood. We have, Your Honor. On the first count of aggravated child abuse, how does the jury find guilty? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes. On the second count of aggravated child abuse, how does the jury find guilty? Count after count. 43 charges in total. Guilty on every single one. By the time the forewoman finished speaking, half the courtroom was openly weeping. Parents held their children close. Victims who had waited years for this moment clutched each other in disbelief. Victoria Harmon sat motionless, her face finally showing the truth behind the mask. She looked old, defeated, broken. Victoria Harmon, the judge said, her voice carrying the weight of 15 years of injustice. You have been found guilty of 43 counts of aggravated child abuse against the children entrusted to your care. Your actions represent a profound betrayal of the most sacred duty a teacher holds, to protect and nurture the young minds in their charge. She paused, letting the words sink in. It is the sentence of this court that you be remanded to the state correctional facility for a term of no less than 25 years, with no possibility of parole. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none to give. Victoria Harmon was led away in handcuffs. As she passed Marcus's row, she stopped, looked directly at Lily. I made you stronger, she hissed. You should thank me. Lily didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't look away. You didn't make me stronger, she said quietly. My daddy did. My family did. You just showed me what evil looks like, so I'd know it when I see it again. Victoria's face contorted with rage, but the bailiffs were already pulling her forward, dragging her toward the door that would lead to her cell. The last thing Marcus saw was her back bent and defeated, disappearing into custody. It was over. After everything, the discovery, the investigation, the kidnapping, the rescue, it was finally over. Victoria Harmon would never hurt another child again. But the story didn't end there. 2 weeks after Victoria's conviction, Richard Harmon faced his own reckoning. The federal charges against him were staggering: conspiracy to cover up child abuse, obstruction of justice, kidnapping, attempted murder, embezzlement, fraud, money laundering. The list went on for pages. Unlike his sister, Richard had tried to bargain. He had offered to testify against his associates to reveal the full scope of his corrupt empire, to give up everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. The prosecutors had refused. Mr. Harmon, the lead attorney, had told him, "You orchestrated a 15-year cover-up that allowed your sister to torture dozens of children. You used your position of public trust to protect a predator. And when someone finally had the courage to expose the truth, you kidnapped a 6-year-old girl and threatened to kill her." She had leaned forward, her eyes cold as ice. "There is no deal that could possibly account for what you've done. You will face the full weight of federal justice, and you will spend the rest of your life in prison." Richard Harmon was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 40 years without parole. As he was led from the courtroom, he walked past Marcus without a word. There was nothing left to say. The man who had terrorized a community for 3 decades had been reduced to just another prisoner in an orange jumpsuit. But Marcus felt no satisfaction watching him go, only a weary relief that this particular monster had been caged. The real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in what came after. Principal Douglas Webb, who had flipped on the Harmons in exchange for a reduced sentence, served 18 months for his role in the cover-up. He emerged a broken man, shunned by the community he had helped victimize for so long. 3 other administrators were terminated and faced criminal charges of their own. The superintendent resigned in disgrace. Half the school board was replaced in a special election that saw record voter turnout. The entire system that had enabled Victoria Harmon's abuse was dismantled piece by piece. And in its place, something new began to grow. It started with a bill introduced to the Montana State Legislature, sponsored by a freshman representative who had been one of Victoria's victims. 20 years ago, it proposed sweeping reforms to how schools handled abuse allegations. They called it Lily's Law. The bill required mandatory reporting of all abuse allegations to law enforcement, not just school administrators. It established anonymous tip lines in every school. It created a state database to track teachers with abuse complaints, preventing them from quietly transferring to new districts. It funded child advocates whose sole job was to investigate concerns independent of school administration. Marcus testified before the legislature in support of the bill. So did Susan Ramirez, Janet Morrison, and dozens of other witnesses. So did victims from across the state who had suffered in silence for years. But the most powerful testimony came from Lily herself. She stood before the assembled representatives, her small voice amplified by a microphone that seemed almost as big as she was, and told them her story. "I was 6 years old when Mrs. Harmon started hurting me," she said. "Every day I was scared to go to school. Every day I believed the lies she told me. Every day I thought nobody would help me." She paused, gathering herself. "But my daddy helped me, and his friends helped me. And a lot of brave people stood up and said that hurting kids is wrong, even when powerful people wanted them to be quiet." She looked directly at the representatives. "I was lucky. My daddy found out what was happening. But some kids aren't lucky. Some kids don't have anyone to fight for them. Some kids are still being hurt right now in schools just like mine, and nobody knows because nobody's looking." Her voice grew stronger. "You can change that. You can make it so no kid has to feel like I felt. You can make schools safe, really safe, for everyone." She raised her chin. "I'm just a kid. I can't make laws. But you can. So please, please make this law. Please help the kids who can't help themselves." The chamber was silent when she finished. Then one by one the representatives rose to their feet. A standing ovation that lasted nearly 3 minutes. Lily's Law passed unanimously. Marcus watched from the gallery as the governor signed it into law. Lily standing beside him, her face beaming with a joy that seemed to light up the entire room. "This bill represents the best of what we can be as a society," the governor said. "It represents our commitment to protect the most vulnerable among us. And it represents the courage of a little girl who refused to stay silent, even when staying silent would have been easier." He looked down at Lily. Young lady, you have shown more bravery than most adults will ever know. Your name will be attached to this law forever, and generations of children will be safer because of what you did. Lily smiled up at him. I didn't do it alone. My daddy helped, and the bikers helped, and all the other families helped. We did it together. The governor nodded slowly. And that's the real lesson here, isn't it? That when good people stand together, there's no evil they can't overcome. The signing ceremony made national news. So did the story of how it came to be a father who stumbled onto abuse, a motorcycle club that rallied to support him, a community that finally found its voice after years of silence. Letters poured in from across the country. Parents thanking Marcus for inspiring them to speak up about their own children's experiences. Victims thanking him for showing that justice was possible. Teachers thanking him for exposing the administrators who had made their jobs impossible. But the letter that meant the most came from an unexpected source. It arrived 3 months after Victoria's conviction, postmarked from a small town in Oregon. Marcus almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail. Then he noticed the handwriting on the envelope. Shaky, uncertain, clearly written by someone very old or very unwell. He opened it and began to read. Dear Mr. Brennan, my name is Eleanor Harmon. I am Victoria's mother. I am writing to you from my bed in a nursing home where I have spent the last 4 years waiting to die. I want you to know that I have followed your story from the beginning. I have watched every news report. I have read every article. And I have wept more tears than I thought I had left in my ancient body. What my daughter did to those children was evil. There is no other word for it. And I must bear some of the responsibility because I raised her. I shaped her. I failed to see the darkness growing inside her until it was too late. Richard was always her protector. Even as children, he would cover for her cruelties, hide her worst behaviors from my sight. I thought he was being a good brother. I didn't understand that he was enabling a monster. I cannot undo what my children have done. I cannot bring back the innocence they stole from so many young lives. All I can do is tell you how sorry I am, and pray that someday, somehow God will forgive me for the role I played. Your daughter's testimony broke my heart, not because she condemned Victoria that condemnation was earned, but because she showed such grace, such strength, such light in the face of such darkness. She reminded me of what children are supposed to be before the world damages them. Please tell her that an old woman in Oregon is praying for her every night. Tell her that her courage has given me hope, that goodness still exists in this world. Tell her that her name, Lily, will be the last word on my lips when I finally leave this earth. With deepest regret and admiration, Eleanor Harmon. Marcus read the letter 3 times before he could process it. Victoria Harmon's own mother, apologizing for the monster she had raised. Taking responsibility for failing to stop the darkness. He showed the letter to Lily that evening. She's sad, Lily said after reading it. Really, really sad. Does that change how you feel about what Victoria did? Lily shook her head. No. What Mrs. Harmon did was wrong and she had to go to jail for it. But her mom didn't do those things. And she's sorry. She looked up at Marcus. Can we write back? Can we tell her that I forgive her? Marcus felt his heart swell with pride. His daughter, after everything she had endured, still had room for compassion, still had the capacity to see the human behind the tragedy. Yeah, baby, we can write back. They composed the letter together that night. Lily dictated while Marcus wrote her words, simple but powerful. Dear Mrs. Harmon, thank you for writing to us. I'm sorry you're sick, and I hope you feel better soon. What your daughter did was really bad, and it hurt a lot of kids, including me. But you didn't do those things. You're just a mom who's sad about what happened. I understand being sad. I forgive you for whatever you think you did wrong. My daddy says forgiveness is how we let go of the bad feelings so they don't hurt us anymore. I don't want to carry bad feelings forever. I want to be happy. I hope you find peace. That's what my mommy would want me to say. She's in heaven now, but I think she would like you because you said sorry and meant it. Love, Lily Brennan. They mailed the letter the next morning. 2 weeks later, they received word that Eleanor Harmon had passed away peacefully in her sleep, the letter clutched in her hands. Life moved forward, as it always does. Lily started therapy with a specialist in childhood trauma. The first few sessions were hard. Lots of tears, lots of nightmares, lots of moments when she regressed to the frightened little girl who believed she was worthless. But slowly, with patience and love, she began to heal. She started drawing again. Not the dark, troubled images she had produced in the months before Marcus discovered the abuse, but bright, hopeful pictures filled with sunshine and flowers and people holding hands. Her first completed drawing after the trial showed Marcus on his motorcycle, Lily sitting behind him, both of them smiling as they rode into a golden sunset. At the bottom, in her careful 6-year-old handwriting, she had written, "Me and Daddy, free." Marcus framed it and hung it above his bed. The Iron Wolves became a permanent part of their lives. Gunnar and Rachel visited regularly, bringing gifts for Lily and brotherhood for Marcus. The club held a special ceremony reinstating Marcus as a full member, not because he asked for it, but because they insisted. "You never stopped being one of us," Gunnar told him as he handed back the leather vest Marcus had put away 3 years ago. "You just took a different road for a while. Now you're home." Marcus accepted the vest with tears in his eyes. But he knew he would never ride the way he used to. His life had changed. His priorities had shifted. The open road would always call to him, but Lily would always come first. That's what being a father meant. 6 months after the trial, the Iron Wolves unveiled their greatest gift. They had purchased an abandoned community center on the edge of town and spent months renovating it from the ground up. New walls, new paint, new equipment. A space designed specifically to support families in crisis counseling rooms, play areas, meeting spaces, a kitchen that could feed dozens. They called it Elena's house. The dedication ceremony drew hundreds of people. Families who had been helped during the fight against the Harmons. Victims who had found their voices. Community members who wanted to celebrate the hope rising from so much pain. Marcus stood at the podium, Lily beside him, and looked out at the crowd. 3 years ago, I lost my wife. She was the best person I ever knew. Kind, brave, loving. She would have done anything to protect our daughter. His voice caught, but he pushed through. When she died, I thought I lost everything. I thought I had to give up who I was to be the father Lily needed. I thought I had to choose between my brotherhood and my family. He looked at Gunnar standing with the assembled Iron Wolves. I was wrong. What I learned through this whole terrible experience is that family isn't either or. Family is everyone who shows up when you need them. Everyone who stands beside you when the world turns against you. Everyone who fights for your children as if they were their own. He placed his hand on Lily's shoulder. Elena's house is named for my wife, but it belongs to everyone. To every family that's struggling. To every child who needs protection. To every person who's looking for hope in a world that sometimes seems hopeless. He took a deep breath. Elena used to say that the measure of a community isn't how it treats its strongest members, but how it protects its weakest. Building this place is how we protect our weakest. This is how we honor those we've lost by serving those who remain. Lily tugged his hand. He leaned down so she could whisper in his ear. "Can I say something?" He nodded and lifted her up so she could reach the microphone. "Hi," she said, her small voice carrying across the crowd. "I'm Lily. The place is named after my mommy." A warm murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the audience. "My mommy went to heaven before I could really remember her, but my daddy tells me stories about her every night. He says she was brave and strong and she loved me more than anything in the whole world." Lily's eyes found the Iron Wolves in the crowd. "When the bad teacher hurt me, I thought I was alone. But then my daddy came, and his friends came, and a lot of people I didn't even know came. They all helped me. They all made me feel safe." She smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. "My mommy can't help people anymore because she's in heaven. But this place can. Every time someone comes here and gets help, it's like my mommy is helping them. Even though she's gone, she's still making the world better." She looked at Marcus. "Right, Daddy?" Marcus couldn't speak. He could only nod, tears streaming down his face. The crowd erupted in applause. Not polite applause, but thunderous, heartfelt applause that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Lily buried her face against Marcus's shoulder, overwhelmed by the response. "Did I do good?" she whispered. "You did perfect, baby. Absolutely perfect." The ribbon cutting happened an hour later. Lily held the oversized scissors while Marcus and Gunnar steadied them. Together they cut through the red ribbon, officially opening Elena's house to the community. Within a month, it was serving dozens of families. Within a year, it had become a model that other communities began to replicate. Within 3 years, there were Elena's houses in 7 states, all dedicated to supporting families affected by abuse and helping communities protect their most vulnerable members. The legacy of one woman's memory had become a movement. On the first anniversary of Victoria Harmon's conviction, Marcus took Lily to the cemetery where Elena was buried. They brought flowers, lilies of course, and stood together in the morning sunshine. "Hi, Mommy," Lily said softly. "It's me, Lily. I'm 7 now. I got taller." Marcus listened as his daughter told her mother about everything that had happened. The trial, the law, Elena's house, the healing. "I still miss you," Lily said at the end. "But Daddy says missing people is how we know they were important. So I guess I'll always miss you because you're the most important person ever." She placed her flowers on the grave. "I'm not scared anymore, Mommy. The bad lady is in jail. The bad man too. And Daddy's here. He always protects me. Just like you would if you could." She turned to Marcus. "Can we go for a ride now you promised?" Marcus smiled through his tears. "Yeah, baby. Let's go for a ride." They walked back to where his motorcycle waited, a new Harley purchased with money he'd saved for years, finally allowing himself to embrace both parts of his identity. Father and biker, protector and rider. The man Elena had fallen in love with, and the man Lily needed him to be. He helped Lily into her specially designed seat, secured her helmet, and climbed on in front of her. Ready. Ready. The engine roared to life. Marcus felt Lily's arms wrap around his waist, felt her trust and love flowing through that simple embrace. They rode out of the cemetery and onto the open road, the wind in their faces, the sun on their backs, the future stretching endlessly before them. Behind them, Elena's grave stood peaceful in the morning light. And if Marcus believed in such things, which, after everything he'd seen, he was starting to, he could have sworn he felt his wife's presence riding with them, watching over them. Proud of the man he'd become and the daughter they'd raised together, even if she'd only had 3 short years to do it. The road stretched on toward the mountains, toward the Iron Wolves clubhouse where Gunnar was hosting a barbecue, toward a community that had learned to stand up for its children, toward a future that was bright and full of possibility. Marcus Brennan had once believed he had to choose between being a biker and being a father. He had believed that protecting his daughter meant giving up everything else he was. He had been wrong. The truth was simpler and more profound than he ever could have imagined. Being a father didn't mean becoming someone new. It meant becoming the best version of who he already was. It meant channeling every skill, every value, every piece of loyalty and courage the Iron Wolves had taught him into the most important job in the world, protecting his child. The rumble of the motorcycle echoed across the valley as they rode toward home. Lily laughed with pure joy, her voice carried away by the wind. And Marcus Brennan smiled, knowing with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever storms might come, he would face them the same way he had faced everything else. With courage, with brotherhood, with love. Because that's what fathers do. That's what family does. They show up, they stand together, they fight for what matters, and they never ever give up on the people they love. The Iron Wolves rode behind them, now 200 strong, their engines a chorus of solidarity and strength. They had come when Marcus called. They had fought when fighting was needed. They had shown a community what real protection looked like. And they would do it again tomorrow and the next day and every day after that for as long as children needed champions and families needed defenders and evil needed to be opposed. This was their purpose. This was their legacy. This was who they were. Lily Brennan would grow up surrounded by that legacy. She would heal from her trauma and become a woman of extraordinary courage and compassion. She would tell her story to countless others, inspiring them to speak up, to fight back, to believe that justice was possible, even when the odds seemed impossible. She would carry scars, yes, but she would also carry strength, the strength of a father who never stopped fighting for her, the strength of a brotherhood that treated her as family, the strength of a mother whose love transcended death itself. And someday, when she had children of her own, she would tell them about the day her daddy walked into a school unannounced and saw something that changed everything. She would tell them about the 200 bikers who rose up to protect a little girl they'd never met. She would tell them about courage and justice and the power of community. And she would tell them the most important lesson of all, that darkness can never win as long as good people are willing to stand up and fight. That every child deserves to be protected, believed, and loved. That family isn't just blood, it's everyone who shows up when you need them most. And that sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes. They wear leather vests and ride Harleys and answer the call whenever a child needs saving. The sun set over Montana as the iron wolves rode home, their engines fading into the golden dusk. And somewhere in the distance, if you listened very carefully, you could almost hear Elena Brennan laughing with joy. Her family was safe. Her legacy was secure. Her love lived on. That was enough. That was everything.